Let's talk about finding common denominators. You need to be able to rewrite fraction pairs with common denominators. You need this if you're working on ordering fractions so that you can tell which ones are least, which ones are greater. And you need it to be able to add and subtract fractions because before you can add or subtract, you have to have common denominators. Well, there's two things we're going to talk about. One is the quick common denominator, or QCD, and the other one is the least common denominator, or sometimes it's referred to as LCD. Now, the quick common denominator is a really quick way to find common denominators. All you do when you're finding a quick common denominator is multiply your two denominators together. Okay, so if I look at this first example, my denominators are 7 and 3. I just multiply them together, 7 times 3, and the answer, or the product, 21, is a number that will work for a denominator. So 21 would be the QCD in this example. So I could use 21 as my denominator, and then I just rewrite each of the fractions so that they have a denominator of 21. Remember, whatever you do to the denominator, do the same thing to the numerator. So if I'm multiplying 7 times 3, I have to multiply 2 times 3 to get my numerator, 6. And here, if I'm multiplying 3 times 7, I have to multiply 1 times 7 as well to get my numerator of 7. Now I have renamed these fraction pairs with a common denominator. And I used the QCD, just multiplied the two denominators together. Now a lot of times the QCD is great. It works really well and it's quick. That's why it's called the quick common denominator. But there's also a lot of times when the QCD is not the best denominator to use. Let's take a look at example B. If I use the QCD, I have to do 8 times 16. Now, I don't really know off the top of my head what 8 times 16 is. It's 128, but that's not an easy problem to multiply in your head. The other problem with doing 8 times 16 is that there's a denominator that's a far lower number that would work better in that instance. And I just have to find it. Now, what least common denominator means is that it's the lowest possible denominator that works. That's why it's called the least or lowest. Now, there's different ways to find it, and sometimes it's not easy to find. Usually, if that's the case, it's because you don't know your multiplication facts well enough, or you might not know your divisibility rules all that well. But if you have a really good hold on those multiplication facts, finding the least common denominator will be much easier for you. I want to say possible. Now, one thing you can do is you can take each of your denominators and you can make a list. You can make a list of their factors and you can make a list of their multiples. Okay, so for the number 8, and we don't use 1 because every number is divisible by 1, but the factors of 8 would be 2, 4, and 8. The multiples of 8 would be, counting by 8, 16, 24, and so on. Now, as soon as I hit 16, I know I could stop there because 16 is the other denominator. So for sure, 16 could be used as a common denominator. Now, I don't know if that's the least possible yet, though. Let's take a look at the factors of 16. 16, besides 1, has factors of 2, 4, and 8, and 16 also. So, they match up really, really well. Now, 2 is the least of those. If 2 were to work as a common denominator, that would be the least common denominator for sure. Well, in order for 2 to work, I'd have to divide 8 divided by 4 to get 2. If I take my 5 and I divide by 4, it doesn't work out to be a whole number, does it? So 2 is not going to work with this fraction. Well, let's check 4. In order for 4 to be my denominator, I would have to do 8 divided by 2 to get 4. So 5 divided by 2 also would not work because my answer is not a whole number. So 4 is not going to work either. Well, how about 8? Here I already have an 8, so I know it works there. If I come over here, to change that 16 to an 8, I would have to divide by 2. 16 divided by 2 equals 8. That means I also have to divide this by 2. 4 divided by 2 equals 2. It does work out as a whole number. So that tells me that 8 will work. So I can just leave 5/8 as it is, and then I can divide 4/16 by 2 over 2. 4 divided by 2 is 2. 16 divided by 2 is 8. And I can rewrite 4/16 as 2/8. Now I have common denominators, okay? And it's the least common denominator because it's the lowest possible denominator that works.